On December 11, 1978, a crew of masked gunmen walked into JFK Airport and walked out with nearly $6 million. It was the largest cash heist in American history. But the craziest part, the robbery itself, was the easy part. What happened after is why the Mafia built an entire cottage industry around making people disappear. If you think you know how a mob story ends, you aren't ready for the absolute bloodbath. Triggered by 64 minutes inside an airport vault. It started with a degenerate gambler named Louis Werner. He was a Lufthansa cargo agent who owed $20,000 to mob bookies. To clear his debt, he handed over the keys to the kingdom, the exact schedule of when untraceable American currency flown in from West Germany would sit in a single vulnerable vault. The information made its way to Jimmy the Gent Burke, a ruthless Lucchese crime family associate. Jimmy assembled a crew of heavy hitters, including a young Henry Hill. The plan was surgical: slip in at 3 a.m., disable the guards, drain the vault, and vanish before the morning shift even woke up. But the mob forgot one crucial variable: a single, frantic mistake by an inside man that was about to turn a flawless robbery into a horrific internal execution squad. The crew was already pulling up to the tarmac, completely unaware that their fate was sealed before they even pulled their masks down. At exactly 3:12 a.m., blanketed by a dense, freezing winter fog rolling off Jamaica Bay, a pitch-black Ford Econoline van cut its headlights and rolled silently past the outer security fence of John F. Kennedy International Airport. The heavily armed crew inside moved with the absolute cold, detached precision of a seasoned military unit. Subduing the perimeter security in seconds, they breached Cargo Building 261, methodically rounding up the skeleton night shift crew one by one. With zip ties and raw intimidation, they forced the terrified employees face down onto the grease-stained linoleum floor of the break room, warning them that a single breath out of line would be their last. This crew wasn't operating on guesswork. They held a stolen, highly confidential internal blueprint of the terminal and knew every security blind spot by heart. When the cargo supervisor hesitated, his fingers trembling wildly as he stood before the heavy steel dial of the inner vault, a towering masked gunman stepped forward. He didn't yell. Instead, he pressed the icy barrel of a snub-nosed revolver firmly into the supervisor's neck and whispered a horrifying sequence of facts: his exact suburban home address, his wife's middle name, and the specific route his young children walked to school every morning. Paralyzed by absolute terror, the supervisor spun the final combination. 10 seconds later, the heavy dual-lock steel vault swung open to reveal the Holy Grail, a mountain of canvas shipping sacks packed tight with completely untraceable, non-sequential federal banknotes flown in directly from West Germany. The mobsters formed a rapid, synchronized human conveyor belt, frantically hoisting 72 heavy canvas bags, totaling a staggering 2,700 pounds of dead weight, out of the vault's depths and throwing them into the open cargo bay of their waiting van. By 4:16 a.m., the heavily weighted vehicle cleared the airport tarmac and dissolved effortlessly into the pre-dawn highway traffic. 64 minutes flat. No alarms had sounded, no silent distress signals were tripped, and not a single bullet had been fired. Jimmy Burke had completely outmaneuvered the FBI, orchestrating what law enforcement would instantly label the perfect historical crime. But while the mastermind celebrated, a ticking time bomb was already counting down. Within 48 hours, an unbelievably sloppy, drug-fueled blunder by a trusted driver would transform this absolute criminal masterpiece into a frantic, paranoid race against a mafia hit squad that was already preparing to leave zero witnesses alive. The protocol for erasing the primary piece of physical evidence was supposed to be completely foolproof. Drive the Econoline getaway van directly across the state line to a highly secure, mob-controlled salvage yard tucked away in New Jersey, where an industrial compactor would crush it into an unrecognizable cube of scrap metal within minutes. That critical, high-stakes assignment was handed to Parnell Stax Edwards, a low-level Lucchese associate, occasional blues singer, and trusted neighborhood wheelman. But instead of keeping his head down and immediately heading for the highway, Stax let the adrenaline and a heavy dose of marijuana completely cloud his judgment. Desperate to celebrate the multi-million-dollar score, he drove the highly radioactive vehicle straight back to his girlfriend's apartment complex in a densely populated corner of Brooklyn. Compounding his fatal mistake, he carelessly abandoned the van directly in a heavily patrolled, brightly lit fire lane. When Monday morning arrived, New York City traffic cops immediately spotted the illegally parked vehicle and called it in. Though the interior had been quickly dusted down with bleach to remove fingerprints, the careless getaway driver left behind an absolute gold mine of forensic evidence. Police and federal agents recovered structural registration data, deep-tread muddy footprints matching Stack's shoes, and a direct, unassailable paper trail leading straight back to the inner sanctum of Jimmy Burke's crew. The FBI didn't just have a lead, they suddenly possessed a definitive roadmap containing the real names of every single person involved in the heist. The second news broke that the feds had seized the getaway vehicle. A toxic, suffocating wave of paranoia began to aggressively rot Jimmy Burke's mind. Scanning the room at his loose-lipped, drug-addled associates, who were suddenly swimming in millions of unearned dollars, he fell back on a brutal mathematical axiom of the American Mafia. A multi-million-dollar secret can only remain perfectly safe between 10 desperate men if 9 of those men are put 6 feet under the dirt. Jimmy opened up a fresh notebook, and with a cold stroke of his pen, he began to systematically cross off names. What followed over the subsequent weeks was an absolute scorched earth campaign, a mafia bloodbath of historic and terrifying scale that completely gutted the Lucchese ranks. Stax Edwards was selected as the opening message. A hit team caught him completely off guard, pumping 6 hollow-point bullets directly into his chest while he lay asleep in his own bed. Next came Frenchie McMahon and Joe Manrie, whose bullet-riddled bodies were found weeks later, slowly freezing and decaying inside the compacted rear cabin of an abandoned garbage truck in a desolate wasteland of Brooklyn. But the most high-profile casualty was Tommy DeSimone, the wildly unstable, psychotic enforcer whose violent hair-trigger temper famously served as the inspiration for Joe Pesci's iconic portrayal in the film Goodfellas. Tommy was cleverly lured to a suburban home under the false, joyous pretense that he was finally going to be formally made into the Gambino crime family. Instead of receiving a title, he was shot execution-style directly in the back of the head the moment he stepped through the doorway, his body dissolved or buried in an anonymous concrete basement. Anyone who dared to ask for their fair share of the heist money, or anyone Jimmy even remotely suspected might flinch under the weight of an FBI interrogation, was hunted down with chilling efficiency. Jimmy Burke wasn't just pulling triggers to avoid a life sentence, he was aggressively eliminating his business partners out of pure, unadulterated greed so that every single dollar of the cash belonged solely to him. When the smoke finally cleared and the bodies stopped turning up in dumpsters, the legal fallout of the greatest heist in American history was surprisingly microscopic. Out of the entire sprawling network of thieves, planners, and enforcers, only Louis Werner, the heavily indebted airport insider whose initial tip-off set the entire plot into motion, was ever actually tried and convicted for the physical robbery itself. Henry Hill, utterly consumed by a paralyzing day-to-day terror that his lifelong friend Jimmy Burke was about to put a bullet in his brain, made the ultimate underworld pivot. He shattered the sacred vow of omerta, flipped completely to state's evidence, and traded his mob life for the safety of the Federal Witness Protection Program, ultimately providing the testimony that locked Jimmy Burke away behind bars for the rest of his natural life on unrelated charges. Yet, decades after the sirens faded, the ultimate mystery of the Lufthansa heist remains completely untouched. To this very day, not a single dollar of the $5 million in cash, nor a single ounce of the $1 million in rare jewels has ever been found by authorities. The entire fortune vanished completely into thin air. In the end, the legendary Lufthansa job permanently etched a dark, unyielding law into the annals of true crime history. Plotting and pulling off the perfect multi-million-dollar robbery is actually the easy part. It's surviving the unbridled greed of your own closest friends in the aftermath that is completely impossible. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next.